Before we jump into today's episode, a quick note to say that open wide conversations are for interest only. We don't provide medical or clinical advice or legal or employee relations advice. Please do consult with a qualified healthcare professional if you have specific concerns related to your mental health or any medical conditions. Open Wide is recorded on the land of the Bunurong people. We acknowledge the richness and diversity of Indigenous communities and the wisdom of storytelling that has been passed down from generation to generation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Hi, I'm Natalie Phillips-Mason, and this is the Open Wired podcast. Through respectful curiosity, we have candid conversations that explore human diversity and how to create inclusive ecosystems for all minds, bodies, and identities. My guests are change makers who are doing the practical, often unglamorous work to make inclusion real. We are streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. My guest today is Ryan Kelly. He's the founder of Creative Natives, a full-service recruitment agency based in Melbourne and in Sydney. Creative Natives places roles in the creative, digital and marketing space. Ryan kindly invited me onto a webinar in 2024, and I've quietly watched how he continues to put out the good vibes into the universe when it comes to hiring flexibility and hiring equitably. So thanks for coming along to chat, Ryan, today.
Thanks for having me, Nat. Very kind words from you. It's good fun to be on the other side of the mic, so to speak. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for having me.
With pleasure. There is a really important purpose to Creative Natives, but I was doing a bit of prep today and I read through the Creative Natives website again, and on your homepage it says, "We connect talent and great work. It's a simple philosophy done by listening, being nice and giving a shit." So we probably should have warned everyone listening today that there will be a touch of swearing. And then on your About Us page, it says, "We genuinely give a shit and care about both our clients and our candidates." I'm not a copywriter and I don't know all the rules on website copy, but I'm sure swearing is not necessarily in there. So those words were clearly chosen very intentionally. They're sitting in text on your website. So let's start with that and why creating a recruitment agency with purpose, how that's evolved, whether you can you articulate for us that purpose and why it sits at the heart of your business?
I guess to kind of go back to the beginning and where I've tried to approach building a business slightly differently to perhaps more traditional recruitment agencies is, I think at heart I am a marketer and I studied marketing. My first role out of university was marketing, and I really believe that if we're going to be a sustainable business long term, then we've really got to be creating a brand. I'm no brand expert, but for me, brand is how it makes people feel when they interact with either your product or service. And for me, I look broadly when it comes to brand and looking at things from who makes up the ecosystem that our brand serves. And we've always looked at how we can contribute and help everyone within that ecosystem to help build a brand. And that's everything from graduate workshops we've run, as you've been part of, Nat, like countless webinars designed to help businesses, help job seekers. So we're not looking exclusively at those who, might pay our bills. We're actually looking at the broader landscape of who makes up our community. And so as part of that, we've just really over the years I guess an internal ethos, and hopefully it translates externally, is that we can't necessarily place everyone in a job. That would be physically impossible for our business, but to some degree we can help them. That's kind of been a bit of our North Star with it, and so leading with empathy and trying to help as many people as possible, for me, just makes both commercial sense from building a brand, but it's also for me an ethical purpose as well.
So can I be a little bit controversial here and say that the talent recruitment field for a lot of people can be a negative experience? If you're in a position of finding a job, there's a lot of, particularly at the moment, I think in the current environment, as you talk about quite often, and you're quite vocal about this, the concept of not, ghosting candidates, and I've been part of some of these processes, we're a circle back employer, but we might never hear from you again as a candidate. Yep. Your words carry a lot of weight for me. How does that actually translate into action? What is it that you do to bring that purpose to life?
Yeah, so look, I think something to probably highlight, and I think that there is often a negative narrative to recruiters, okay? And I think ultimately those who speak positively of recruiters are genuinely people that either land a job or, hopefully have a good experience, right? But I also understand for a lot of recruiters, and us included, like at times it is so difficult to manage the volume of people that are reaching out to you, okay? And so all I would say is that, yes, this is our purpose and values, but I'm not sat here going, we're perfect, okay? And I think that is something that it does play a part in, I guess, my mental load often is, you're wanting to help as many people as possible. You want to get back to people, but you also don't want to waste your time. But you've also got to try and get the jobs on in the first place, right? And so how that translates, and I guess why I do these sessions where we'll get 100 people on a call and I will literally give them the exact advice I would give to them one-on-one, but I'm able to do it on a mass level, right? And that's just me being economical with my time, okay? So as much as I want to help everyone, it's sometimes just physically impossible. But I also understand how frustrating it can be from an application perspective if you don't hear back, right? I'm not excusing that. I'm not saying that's right, but there's also a moment where you have to kind of look after your own mental health and kind of accept that we can't help every single person, but we can try our best and we can be okay with that because we are doing our best.
Absolutely. And I think you touch on something that I don't know that many people necessarily think about when they're not in the talent space, and that is the mental load that you carry when you are trying to help people, genuinely help people, and you're not going to be able to do that. So I think that's a really important point and a really important point of vulnerability. So anyone who follows you on socials knows how vocal you are, because I'd like to get into talking about inclusive hiring and inclusive recruitment, because I think, it's a brilliant topic. So you are continually and very consistently vocal about supporting return to work parents and part-time and flexible working, very close to my heart. Coincidentally, and I don't know if you know this, both you and I had these random LinkedIn posts that reached about 50,000 people. Yours was, I think, talking to something similar. Mine was actually a photo of me pregnant, kind of going, hey, and I barely thought about this post, by the way. I barely thought about it before I posted it. And it was just a photo of me pregnant with my first daughter saying, you know what? We never talked about workplace adjustments, but I had a compassionate manager and I said, I actually am really struggling with this pregnancy and I just can't come in, or can you give me some flexibility? And that post resonated so strongly with people in a way that I never anticipated. And I think you had a post that resonated quite strongly with people too. This kind of concept of a workplace adjustment, and we never talked about it 23 years ago. It was just nothing we mentioned. It wasn't really out there. What have you observed on the recruitment side and on the candidate side? You are so vocal about this. Yeah. Talk to us about where that comes from and what you see.
I think that why I'm so vocal has two very different reasons. But I mean, the first is from a place of genuine empathy. I am a parent of two kids. I've seen the sheer amount of load that goes into parenting and mothering. So it's from a place of empathy. But I think to move slightly in a different lane, it also, to me, makes complete commercial sense. Okay. Now, commercial sense in the sense of being able to facilitate someone's journey going through a challenging chapter, 99% of the time, if you give those people the flexibility and trust that they need during that chapter, that comes back in spades in the form of loyalty, right? I think something which, I'm always talking about this fractional part-time hire, right? I think needs to be a bit of a reality check from hiring managers that think that the person coming into the office 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, is doing 40 hours of work. Okay. We have never been more distracted. I would say on average, people are checking their phone, they're on social, so there's this myth that someone going into the office 5 days a week is actually contributing more to the output of an organization. When you have all these things at play, and I see that the challenge that often mums face with actually finding an employer that trust, I'm genuinely saying to them that these highly adaptive, multiple hat-wearing mums are actually able to do the same job in 3.5, 4 days a week because they're not like wasting time and stuff like that. So it's multi-layered, but it's not just I'm on this mission to help parents. Yeah, I am, but I'm also on a mission to help businesses grow and become better because it makes sense for me commercially that they grow and better. So by suggesting this to these companies, it's a win for everyone. And I think that if you are not creating an environment where the younger employees see how well parents are looked after during that phase, how do you intend to keep these people in your organization for a period of time? We've done a lot of initiatives over the years, again, I guess what I've tried to implement is rather than just moaning about the situation, I'm trying to create solutions. So one solution is that we offer half the price recruitment fee for companies that hire parents, right? Yep. Because we are all the byproduct of the behavior that is incentivized, okay? So we incentivize it so it makes it more commercially viable. We increase the guarantee period from 6 to 12 months because we want to reduce any reasons why not. We also, a number of years ago, created a guide where businesses could submit their parental leave guide in a way that we created a more transparent understanding of it, of what other businesses are doing. What I always maintain is that it's not about offering the same as the big tech companies or doing that, but it's ultimately finding something you can offer that is compatible for your business, because I understand. And, when we were just a 3-person business, I just implemented an 8-week parental leave for either parent, right? Because that was what we could afford. That was what was feasible, okay?
Yeah.
But I find it very frustrating when businesses, don't have anything, but they don't even, it's like almost a taboo topic. It's like, oh, no. Like, we won't talk about it. And then we hope that they won't ask. And to me, that's just weird, isn't it? Like it's such an important a key requirement that people need, but it's not spoken about in fear that it's going to then have consequences on their career. So it's this kind of out of sight, out of mind mindset where it's not helping. And I think that people feel like they've got to make this choice between a career and family, which is wild. Some of my best and most successful hires that have stayed in organizations and gone on to become part of leadership teams have been mums who have gone in at a 3.5 day a week. The businesses has adjusted. That's a long-term hire. And I think that if you look at the moment, the hiring process is so broken and people are moving jobs so often because that trust isn't forming at a candidate and employer level. Because how can you trust it when there's not these things in place which make you feel safe and secure?
I will never forget, I was 5 months pregnant and I went for an interview with Elizabeth Proust, who was then heading up Asanda. And I walked in, I was 5 months pregnant. It was for a contract role. She gave me the job and I said, I can only give you 3 months, literally, because I'm going to big event. She went, no problem. And I have never, ever, ever forgotten that. The other thing that happens, Ryan, is that when people are given that trust and given those opportunities, you pay it forward. And I've paid it forward in my career when I've had teams when I've had people who have needed that flexibility, you pay it forward. I think it's incredibly important. What I was going to ask you was, how easy is that of a sell to your clients?
It's getting easier. There's probably a few reasons to that. I think there's proof in the pudding in terms of, it is becoming a bit more normalized in that. But I also, similarly to my candidates, I also align with my clients, right? I've, as you know, we're about to turn 7 next month, and over the 7-year journey, I've become clearer and clearer around who I want to do business with and who fits us. And going back to like the content piece and all of that stuff, if you are so clear on like your values and where you want to go and all of that stuff, then you naturally will attract the same type of people that fit within your orbit and think and act the same way, right? Again, I'm not perfect, but I do like to think that I try and do the right thing as often as I possibly can. And I think that over time compounds and you get to a place where you're working with clients that share and align on values. So it's certainly not, we're not at the finish line and we will never get to the finish line, because I don't think that you can ever get to a finish line with this. I think you've just got to be talking about it more. You've got to be sharing examples. You've got to be celebrating the wins. You've got to be kind of creating evidence that it works and evidence that it makes sense. And the more people do it, then it's a win, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, I think we've seen that pendulum swinging on the work from home mandates, if you want to call them that. I hate that word, but actually that's what they are. And so we've seen this swing, since COVID back and forth. And, I think honestly, my view of it is that pendulum swing is the result of where the power base is sitting in the environment, right? Always. So does it sit with talent supply or talent demand? I guess the other thing I wanted to mention at this point is the role of AI and how that's impacting the work that you do and the roles that you're placing, and whether that is having an impact on the level of flexibility and part-time roles that are out there.
Yeah. So just to go back just a sec on that pendulum, okay? And this is a true story, and this happened right in the middle of COVID. And we met with a digital agency, and I explicitly remember that the client said, "You work for us." And I said, "I don't work for either a client or a candidate. I represent you 50-50, right? Because without one, there is no placement, right?" And at the time, we lost that client, okay? And that was a bit of a blow, because it was COVID. We had no money. We were struggling. But it was the moment where I went, like, that has to be our outlook on everything, because as you rightly said, the pendulum will always swing based on what's going economically and what's going on in whatever. There will always be a time where it either favors the buyer or the candidate, okay? Now, if you over-index too much on one, when the pendulum goes against you, you struggle, okay? Yep. And so that's why we internally don't really refer to clients as clients and candidates as candidates, because they're ultimately just people, and they're people on different stages of their buying journey. So one moment that senior person is a candidate, but in a month's time they could be a client, right? So I try not to sort of label either side with the right title, but for me, again, it just goes back to that, right? Do the right thing by both parties and it will come back, right? To your question around AI, I genuinely believe that I deeply think that we have got extremely carried away with how much of our industry is going to be taken away. I don't honestly believe that. I think that we're in this wild west at the moment of thinking that this solution is the answer to everything. And I think that when a lot of creatives who are neurodivergent or, I think they operate in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that a one-size-fits-all AI solution is going to be fit for purpose for everyone. And I think that there is a real human part that isn't being considered when rolling out these tools across these massive organizations, because ultimately people think and respond to tools in a different way. And at the moment, everyone is using lots of different tools. So we are in this period at the moment where we will look back in the near future and go, that was a wild time. Everyone was doing this. And I think it's going to curve out. And I think we're going to see a demand for genuine creative thinking that is so like original, out the box thinking, that is almost like artistry, like almost like that style of skill set will become so elevated. Because I don't know about you, Nat, but I the way my head thinks, I am now looking at every post with like the deepest skepticism now of, have you written that? And I think as consumers, or as people that read and consume content, that critical lens is going to get amplified, where it's going to be like, the moment you feel it's slightly off, you're just going to mentally go, I'm not into that.
I think if you can actually get anyone to be looking at your posts at all, that's step one. I am so cognitively overloaded, to be honest, with channels and, everything coming in. And also, honestly, I'm also learning as I go. As a change practitioner, I always want to make sure that I'm having experience with tools, having experience firsthand with things. So I'm like, great, I'm playing with Claude. I'm playing with, whichever floats my boat. But if I'm honest with you, it is so incredibly distracting that it's actually taking away from the real work.
Yeah, it's melting our brains to the point where, I joke about this, but there was a time where I could go from one part of the city to another without using Google Maps. Now I'm so reliant on it. And I think that for a lot of people who are defaulting it to their first part of their thinking process and just spitting it out, is like, because it's that bit that actually, to me, is the piece that we need to be doubling and down and sharpening and getting that bit better at. But the moment we start lazily offsetting this stuff, we're not going to get any stronger mentally. Creativity
is innately human, is what I believe. I'm hearing you say the same thing, and that creativity and that ability to think. I want to get back into inclusive hiring. What are do you have a few inclusive hiring tips that you kind of swear by?
Look, I think it's really important to understand that for a lot of people, the interview process can be something very different to different people. And I'd love to know like some real data behind this, but the people that interview the best are not always your best hires. And I think that's something that's really important to think about, because we all know those people, and I'm probably one of those who have all the things to say, and they say the right things for that period of time during an interview, and then actually when the job begins, you almost, the layers start to peel back, and the substance that you thought was initially there during that interaction is probably not there. And, lo and behold, the person who was quite shy or introvert, who a bit more considered in their interview, they actually, have a more probably balanced way of their approach is a bit more balanced and a bit more long-term. And so I think that it's important to understand that both introverts and extroverts have their merits, but don't necessarily attribute being an extrovert to being a good hire.
So does that come down to what you're looking for in the interview itself and how we tend to traditionally interview? Because I've spoken about this. Take, for example, giving people a choice to have interview questions in advance. Seems to be incredibly controversial, but actually seems to make a whole lot of sense for a whole lot of reasons. Yep. So that's kind of one example of, is it the system? Is it the way that we are and what we look for? Is it the fact that we still expect people to give us eye contact? Is it, all those different elements of how typical recruitment processes or interviewing processes have occurred? Should we still be using structured interviews? Should we still, be expecting people to be put on the spot with questions? What's your take on that?
I don't think there is a right or wrong answer to that approach. But what I've observed over the years, and I think this is such a missed trick for so many organizations, is the success rate of when someone starts at an organization as a freelancer, right? Mm-hmm. And I encourage it so often, because if you think about it, it's like going on that first date and that other person is like, all right, shall we move in? Right. And you're like, that is quite a mental commitment that you've got to go to. Whereas that's not how real life works, right? You go on a few dates, you actually start to feel like you're actually compatible, and then you go, you know what? Let's make this official. Let's move in, right? And I think the same mindset or the same theory applies to work, right? You go into it as a freelancer, the shackles are off. You don't feel this like need to go all in, right? You kind of just go, yeah, cool, right? Oh, you're actually quite nice. Oh, this work seems interesting. And then sure enough, 5-6 weeks go by and you're like, actually, I'm really enjoying this. Okay, cool, we'll extend it. And that just generally leads to much better outcomes because you're not forcing it, right? And so I know it's not always the case, but I think if an organization has that opportunity to try for both sides it out.
Yeah, it's a try before you buy.
Take it. And don't be skeptical if they don't want to commit to a full-time role, because the trust has been broken in so many organizations and over the last few years where a permanent job is supposedly, stable and, it's going to keep you. Well, that's not existent anymore, right?
No, it's a myth. It's a myth.
So try before you buy if you can. Interviews, I think there's so many variables to what it should be. But I think as the interviewer, your objective is to make the other person feel as relaxed as possible, to see a true representation of them. And I think a good interviewer is able to distill confidence and make them feel good instantly. I get frustrated sometimes when clients go, they came across as really nervous, right? Because I think there's such an easy way to counter that nerve by just kind of addressing it in the conversation and just put them at ease. And I think that's what a good interviewer should do. So make the person feel comfortable, see a true reflection of them, and hopefully that'll get better results.
But isn't that just being human? Most people would be nervous going into an interview when they want a job where there's other things that are dependent on them. Of course, you're being judged.
Of course you are. But I guess, again, I always try and see two sides of it. I also understand from a client's perspective who is interviewing someone who, if it's a client-facing role, they've got to make that judgment of, okay, how will they go in front of my clients? So
yeah,
everyone is judging everyone.
Yeah.
A lot of it isn't necessarily fair, but what you said around being human, yes, it's being human in your perspective, but everyone has a different, I guess, approach to what being human is. I guess it's being empathetic and seeing things on the other side of the fence.
But to the point you made earlier, the try before you buy aspect, how much judgment can you make on one conversation or one interaction, right? You can't. So yes, it's a conundrum. It's really interesting. And I think we've probably named it, which is probably the first time I've heard it, and which is everyone's judging everyone in that environment. Any mistakes that you want to share that have sat with you in terms of what you might have done in the past that you wouldn't necessarily do again? Or
I think we would need a whole new episode for that.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Now, honestly, and I think this is the part which I think is been the biggest learning of running a business is you may, and compare it to parenting, compare it to a lot of things in life, but the sheer number of mistakes is just part and parcel of it. And at the time, whether it's been hiring the wrong person, whether it's been taking the wrong client, whether it's been doing lots of things, but it's actually getting to a place where you can accept that those are just part of running the business and not let them set you back too far, because trying to be perfect and it almost paralyzes you. It almost just stops you. It's probably the reason why so many people don't share content, because they're so paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake or looking stupid, right? I think if you can get to a place where accepting mistakes and knowing that there's going to be another one tomorrow and it will continually happen, but you're trying to do what you can, that's cool. That's where you can start to enjoy it and you're not so constricted by it, right? So I'm kind of at the place now where I know I'm making mistakes regularly. I'm trying my best not to, but also accepting that it's part of life.
And then I wonder if we can just finish off with something you mentioned earlier, because I think it's a really important point. And I'm interested in how you provide, what self-care you do to help your own cognitive load and to keep your own mental health safe and to protect yourself. You're a parent, you're running a business, you've got, a big purpose and trying to help other people and do a whole lot of things. So pure curiosity how what you do to take a break and make sure that you're protecting your own mental health.
Yeah. So I guess I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. So my days are pretty much the same every day, and that's okay. And I've also come to realize that
they won't be for long, by the way.
No. But I think it's, for me, continuous familiarity with what I'm doing. So I run quite a similar schedule every day. So I'll walk the dog in the morning. I'll run in the treadmill in the garage because I don't have time to go to the gym, so I just do that in the garage. I will have a sauna at the end of each day near my work, and I see a therapist every 2 weeks, right? And I have very good friends that kind of, they support, but they also help me see the lighter side of life, because, it can be so consuming, this corporate life and parent life. And I think that where my friends come in is they almost encourage me to not take myself too seriously. They take the piss out of me for LinkedIn, and it's it's absolutely the right thing for friends to do, right? Because it's coming from a place of like, they're not being mean, they're just not allowing me to take myself too seriously, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm fortunate I've got those people in place. My wife, again, keeps me very grounded and again, takes the piss out of me. And it's that kind of combination of self-care, fun, and also just working with people that align with you, right? And so I live near Mornington in Mount Eliza, and so I can't physically go and see all my clients all the time. It wouldn't be compatible. But instead we have events, right? We have a meetup, and we do that twice a year. And I mean, it exhausts me by the end of it, but it fills me up because I need that kind of interaction with people. Video does a point, but it doesn't nurture your brain, I don't think. It doesn't nourish. And the occasional game of golf.
Excellent. Well, you're in a nice spot to be able to do it in Mount Eliza. But on behalf of working parents everywhere, I want to thank you because I think that you are a very consistent voice, and I think that your advocacy of both on the client and candidate side is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Nat. I've enjoyed the chat, and likewise, I love what you're about, and love that you've got your podcast now. And I'm excited to see you get all technical with your podcast, and
No, it won't be me getting technical. I can tell you, it won't be me getting technical. But it was great having you on, and I look forward to more chats in the future.
100%. And next time we'll do it face to face, yeah?
Oh, please.
If you found value in today's chat, the best way to support the podcast is to share it with a colleague. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And I'm always eager to hear your takeaways. So do drop me a DM on Instagram at Inclusive Change or send me an email. All the links to connect with me and to learn more about today's guests are waiting for you in the episode description. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you next time.